The evening was good, actually good. People you like, conversations that went somewhere, laughter that was real. Nothing went wrong, nobody said anything difficult, and you left on time. And yet, by the time you got home, closed the door behind you, and sat down in the quiet, you felt like you had run a marathon in someone else's shoes. Not sad, not overwhelmed, just completely structurally empty, like something had been quietly used up over the course of the evening that you didn't notice losing, and now it was gone. If you have ever come home from a perfectly good night and needed an hour of silence before you could even think straight, this video is going to explain exactly what that feeling is, and more importantly, why it has nothing to do with whether you like people. Here's the first thing most people get wrong about social exhaustion. They call it introversion. And introversion is real. Hans Eysenk's foundational research proposed that people differ meaningfully in baseline cortical arousal, and that those with lower thresholds are more easily overstimulated by social input. That part holds up. But here's the problem with stopping there. Social exhaustion doesn't only happen to introverts. It happens to people who spent the whole evening laughing. It happens to people who genuinely wanted to be there. It happens to people who, by any external measure, were completely fine, and yet arrived home depleted in a way that felt almost physical. Introversion explains part of it. It doesn't explain all of it. And the part it doesn't explain is where things get interesting. Every social interaction you have ever had has involved a second conversation running simultaneously underneath the visible one. While you were talking, tracking the actual words, following the thread, contributing something, another part of your brain was running a continuous background process. Reading faces, monitoring tone, tracking whether the energy in the room was shifting, adjusting your own presentation to match what the moment seemed to require, deciding dozens of times per minute what to show and what to keep off stage. The sociologist Erving Goffman described this in 1959 in what became one of the most cited works in social science, The Presentation of Self in Everyday Life. His argument was that every social interaction is, in a meaningful sense, a performance. Not a dishonest one, a functional one. We all maintain what he called a front stage presentation, the version of ourselves that is appropriate, calibrated, and fit for the current audience. And maintaining that front stage costs something. It requires constant, largely unconscious processing, reading subtle cues, regulating emotional displays, keeping the presentation coherent from one moment to the next. Research on social cognitive load consistently confirms that this kind of effortful social processing is genuinely metabolically costly. It depletes attention, working memory, and emotional resources in ways that accumulate across the duration of an interaction. You weren't just at the party, you were working at the party. The conversation you were having out loud was the visible surface of a much larger, much more demanding operation running underneath it. And some people run that operation at a higher intensity than others. Here's the second mechanism, and it is the one that explains why some people leave the same evening more depleted than others. Your brain was not just tracking the conversation, it was tracking everyone's emotional state. Registering the slight shift in someone's expression when a topic landed wrong. Picking up the undercurrent between two people at the table who were being perfectly polite to each other on the surface. Absorbing, as the evening went on, the emotional weather of everyone in the room. Not deliberately, not consciously, simply because that is what your nervous system does. This connects directly to what we explored in the last video, the neuroscience of sensory processing sensitivity and the depth at which some people process their environment. The research of Dr. Elaine Aron and Dr. Bianca Acevedo established that individuals with higher sensory processing sensitivity show significantly greater activation in brain regions involved in awareness, empathy, and the integration of others' emotional states. In practical terms, the social situation you were in was being processed by your nervous system at a greater depth than it was being processed by most people in that room. You were having the same evening, but you were running a different operating system. And that system uses more resources. There is a third mechanism, the quietest one, and in some ways the most important. Throughout the evening, you were also managing yourself. Not in a performative way, in a very ordinary, very constant way. You were monitoring your own reactions in real time, deciding which ones to express and which ones to soften. Watching the gap between what you actually felt and what the moment called for. Holding that gap open, quietly, for hours. Psychologists call this emotional labor, the ongoing work of managing your own emotional displays to meet the expectations of a social situation. And like any sustained effort, it has a cost. The reason this third mechanism matters is what it reveals about the nature of the exhaustion itself. It is not just physical tiredness. It is not just social stimulation. It is the accumulated cost of 3 overlapping processes running simultaneously for hours. The performance of impression management, the deep processing of everyone else's emotional state, and the quiet, continuous work of managing your own. No single one of them would empty you. All 3 running at once for a full evening. That is where the feeling comes from. That is what you walked home carrying. And here is what makes this particular exhaustion so disorienting. Because it feels like it shouldn't be there. The evening was good. You weren't in conflict. Nothing bad happened. You chose to be there. And yet the tiredness is real as any physical fatigue. And it arrives without an obvious cause, which makes it easy to conclude, quietly and incorrectly, that something is wrong with you. There isn't. The feeling has a name. It has documented mechanisms. It is the entirely predictable result of a nervous system that processes social environments deeply and works hard to navigate them skillfully. What you call being tired after people is, more precisely, the cost of genuine attentiveness. The question is not how to stop feeling this. Depth of processing is not something you switch off, and you would not want to, because it is the same system that makes you perceptive, attuned, and genuinely present in a way that most people around you simply are not. The question is how to stop being surprised by the cost. How to stop treating the exhaustion as evidence of a flaw and start treating it as information. The signal your nervous system sends after a genuine effort. The feeling of having been fully present, fully attentive, fully there. Not everyone who leaves the same evening feels what you feel, but not everyone was paying the same quality of attention. You did not come home depleted because you are broken. You came home depleted because you were completely there, in a way that costs more than most people ever spend. The silence you needed afterward was not withdrawal. It was maintenance. The quiet thing you do when the evening is over and the door is closed, sitting in the stillness, letting the accumulated weight of other people's emotional weather slowly drain back out. That is not antisocial. That is a nervous system doing what it was built to do, returning to baseline after a genuine expenditure. You were never bad at people. You were just better at experiencing them than most people are. And that has always cost more than it looks.